Welcome to Elephant Among Deer. This week I am so privileged to be able to interview Dr. Matt Bonzo. Dr. Bonzo is a professor over here at Cornerstone University and teaches a lot of more philosophy classes. I've had a philosophy class with him. It was a lot of fun. I remember one day you were just walking on tables along the classroom. It was really entertaining, a lot of fun. I'd always recommend taking a class with Dr. Bonzo. Dr. Bonzo every year, I believe it is, leads a trip down to South Africa, my home country, to do a missions trip. And so, Dr. Bonzo, why don't you tell us a little bit about how often you go down there and what's the purpose behind going down there?
Sure. So we've gone for the last 5 years. We'll be going again this coming January, though. No students are going this year. Just be my wife and I going back on the trip. It's a little bit mislabeling to call it a mission trip purely, because it is a study abroad trip. And the way it kind of came about was we offer a class in globalization, and South Africa really kind of represents where all the forces of globalization come together. So one of the big purposes of this class is simply to go experience globalization as we're talking and reading about it. But when we went, I wanted to make sure it wasn't just a kind of go see some poverty and come back and feel bad for the people in Africa.
Yeah.
As much as what kind of connections and relationships can we really form with communities there, and what good can we leave behind? So we've visited the same village all these 5 years. And it's just now that we've kind of got to the point where we understand, I think, what some of the problems are and how we can actually, from Cornerstone, from this side, how we can actually address some of those problems and help ease some of the pain, as it were, in the village.
Helping out with poverty, a
lot of rural poverty. We know poverty here in the U.S., but I think the kind of rural African poverty it's of a different quality, right? Of a different class. It's very difficult to see a way out of that, I think, for them.
Absolutely. When going to South Africa, it's clearly very different. Like you're saying, that poverty itself is different to what we know here in the States, and is just different in that sense. And so when you first went there, the first couple times you've gone down to South Africa, to that same village, are there any instances of that, like specific instances where that culture just absolutely like knocked you back and you were just hit with like how different you are in this context, and besides skin tone, of course.
Right. So that's a big one, right? One of them is sense-wise, in terms, I still remember the first time being out in rural Africa and always smelling smoke and not really understanding why until you realize everybody still cooks over an open fire. So you're always smelling charcoal for the meals. I think, I don't want to go too quickly past the color one, because when we walk in the village there, I mean, we really do sense how different you are. Not that there aren't white people around, but clearly you're in the minority, and you feel you're observed, because they know we're Americans too, right? I mean, it's easy to pick us out. And so one of the problems that comes with it, of course, is every American is a rich American. And so we were perceived as all of us having excessive wealth that we could just fix the problems with. Some of the other cultural differences is how tightly knit the families are and expansive the families are. We were talking about some disagreements within families, and I suggested, well, why don't you move out? Well, that's like telling your family you're dead, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of such deep connection that any physical space really for families means you're dissing them somehow or other. Food-wise, of course, it's always, I was shocked by the fact that, almost 80% of the calories in this village come from a cornmeal pop. And so that produces an incredible amount of diabetes because of the carbohydrates, and how dependent they've become simply upon the government to purchase that pop. The people who once proudly grew lots of their own food now have lost that ability and are dependent upon the government for what food they do end up eating. So yeah, I mean, those are just some of the initial ones. One of the biggest differences I've seen since we're going there is kind of cell phones have arrived in this village.
Okay.
So when we first started coming, maybe one person had it in the village. Last time we were there, all the teenagers had it. So it's just like here, right? You're in a Bible study, and all of a sudden people's cell phone, and it's like, who's calling you? You live in this remote village. Who are you talking to? So it's been remarkable to see how quickly that changes social dynamics.
That is interesting. And do you think, to go back to that food point, do you think that that dependency on government and so on and so forth is as a byproduct of coming out of apartheid and the government promising so many things to its people?
Sure. Yeah, I think, even within the South African Constitution itself, it's a very aggressive form of rights that the Constitution's promise. And I think, some of it truly is people being victim, right? But some of it is being shaped by this kind of modern expectation of entitlement. Maybe is too strong, but this is that the government can fix everything about one's life. I think is way too present in some cases, and certainly not just in Africa or South Africa. I mean, we see that around the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for diving in there. And that last one was a little more philosophical, I'm sure.
Let's keep going.
Well, I don't think we want to go too long. But it was so wonderful having you just to talk to you about that today and your experiences there. And it'll be really cool to talk in the future about it. And
Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you guys for tuning in this week to Elephant Among Deer. Look up next week. There'll be something new. Take care.